This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Ghana gets the first batch of COVAX coronavirus vaccines in Africa. What's next for the COVAX rollout plan? The U.S. FDA says the one-dose Johnson & Johnson vaccine is effective in trials. And 1 year on, South Sudan's unity government still struggles to end conflicts. Hello and a very warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. And with me in studio is Uche Okoronkwo with a preview of your business news.
Thank you, Lindy. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. South Africa scraps tax hikes and turns to Treasury to bankroll its vaccine program. And Zimbabwe raises its lending rates to tackle rising inflation. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, it is back to Lindy.
Thanks, Uche. In our top story, the World Health Organization's global vaccine sharing scheme, COVAX, has made its first delivery. A flight carrying 600,000 doses of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine produced by the Serum Institute of India has landed in Ghana's capital, Accra. The delivery comes 8 months after the launch of the COVAX initiative. The initiative aims at pooling funds from wealthier countries and non-profits to firstly develop a vaccine and then distribute it equitably around the world. The Ghanaian government says the jabs will be used to kickstart a vaccination campaign from the 2nd of March. The drive will prioritize frontline health workers and other members of high-risk populations. Well, let's go live now to Accra, Ghana, with our correspondent Nabil Ahmed Rafai for more on this story. Nabil, tell us, what is the reaction on the ground, and why do you think Ghana has been the first country to get these COVAX vaccines? It appears we have lost our correspondent. We will try and reach him again a little later. For now, though, let's turn to news coming out of Tanzania. The country's government is urging citizens to begin wearing face masks to protect them from what it's calling a respiratory illness that is sweeping the country. The health ministry says it has introduced specific measures to help the country fight the COVID-19 virus. This comes after the WHO once again asked Tanzania to share COVID-19 data. Here's more from CGTN's Daniel Kijo.
The Tanzanian government has come up with a new set of measures in an effort to contain the further spread of COVID-19. This comes after unconfirmed reports of a rise in deaths due to the pandemic. President Magufuli urged citizens to take precautions, including traditional remedies and wear face masks, but only locally made ones. He said he believes some imported face masks have been compromised.
The government has not stopped the use of face masks, but we have to be selective with the masks that we wear. We will be destroyed. Don't think we are very loved. Economic wars are deadly.
Other public health measures now being advised include frequent hand washing with running water and soap and applying sanitizers in the absence of clean water and soap. The extent of the spread of the coronavirus in Tanzania is unknown. Earlier this week, the WHO asked Tanzania to share COVID data as some Tanzanians traveling outside the country have tested positive. In May last year, the country had registered 509 cases and 21 fatalities. But the Deputy Health Minister says data can be used to spread fear.
The use of data is to help you devise scientific measures to counteract the problem. It's not about the health minister announcing how many died every week. Funny, they have no interest in the data of those who recovered. You are creating fear and unrest in the nation.
It's been 9 months since Tanzania last reported its COVID-19 data. The health ministry insists the government is not locking down the country. Part of its new approach it is now calling on all Tanzanians to conduct physical exercises to protect the elderly, those who are obese, and those with underlying health conditions. Other measures include eating balanced diets, following instructions from health experts, putting on face masks, and reporting to health centers after developing symptoms. The WHO and other international organizations have criticized Tanzania's approach to handling the virus, but the Tanzanian government insists it did what was best for its people.
Tanzania looked at all measures that the rest of the world was using, then looked at our unique conditions. Mixing the two, we came up with the approach that has got us here. That's why today the rest of the world is doing what Tanzania did months ago.
Tanzania is choosing not to import vaccines, saying it will only buy medication that has been tested. But global health authorities warn that a vaccine program is key in the fight against the virus. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Well, let's return to our top story this hour. Ghana has become the first country in Africa to receive COVID-19 vaccines from the WHO's COVAX facility. Of course, that facility aims to distribute vaccines to some of the poorest countries around the world. We go live now to Accra, Ghana, where our correspondent Nabil Ahmed Rafai is standing by with the latest. Nabil, of course, Ghana, the first country to receive these COVAX vaccines. What is the reaction on the ground, and why do you think Ghana has been first on COVAX's list?
Well, Lindy, there's a lot of excitement here in Ghana as the first batch of the 600,000 AstraZeneca vaccines arrived at the Kotoka International Airport. There was actually a brief ceremony at the airport where government officials and representatives from the WHO and UNICEF being present to receive the vaccines. But aside that, there's been concerns that there are some people in the country who are not too keen about taking the vaccines, and there will be a need for the government to raise more awareness about the need to take the vaccines. But then if you ask why I think Ghana has become the first to receive the vaccines, I would say that it's because Ghana was quick to sign up for the WHO COVAX program, and also made its intent known that it has the facilities readily available to store the vaccines when they arrive in Ghana before they are being administered on people. So this may be the key reason why Ghana has become the first to receive the vaccine, the fact that it was among the first countries to sign up for the program, and also showing the capacity to store the vaccines when they arrive in Ghana.
And Nabil, of course, Ghana has delivered 600,000, rather COVAX has delivered 600,000 doses to Ghana, but this is just a fraction of the country's vaccine needs. So how does Ghana intend to procure more doses, and will the country consider other vaccines beyond the Oxford AstraZeneca one that has arrived?
Indeed, 600,000 vaccines is really quite a small amount when you compare the total number of about 30 million population that Ghana has. Now, the government some weeks ago said it was going to procure 17.6 million of vaccines by the end of June to complement whatever the COVAX program is going to give to Ghana, which we know is about 2.4 million doses of vaccines that will be brought to the country by the end of this year. But the government has not actually stated which vaccines is going to procure. But then that's the statement that the president put across some weeks ago, that 17.6 million will be procured. Now, aside that, we know that government is also looking elsewhere. When you talk about the Sputnik V vaccine by Russia, the government says it has approved that particular vaccine for usage in Ghana and is looking to receive those vaccines as well. But we don't know the quantity that we are going to receive from the Russia Sputnik V vaccines, but then it's something that the government is also looking towards to procure. Lindy.
Nabil Ahmed Rafai, thank you so much for that update. Joining us there live from Accra, Ghana. Now, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration says the single-shot Johnson & Johnson vaccine has appeared safe and effective in trials. According to documents released, the shot is also effective in preventing the variants detected in South Africa and Brazil. Johnson & Johnson also said its vaccine is effective at preventing asymptomatic cases. On Friday, the FDA's panel of independent experts will meet to decide whether to formally approve the shot. An emergency use authorization is likely to follow. Meanwhile, scientists tracking the spread of new COVID-19 variants in Africa have their work cut out for them. A lack of genome sequencing capabilities in many African countries has made it difficult to determine if new strains, including the one first detected in South Africa, could be behind the resurgence of cases and deaths on the continent. Africa's coronavirus cases are edging towards 4 million, with over 100,000 deaths. CGTN's Julie Shire looks at testing challenges on the continent.
South Africa is one of few African countries able to track the coronavirus since reporting its first case last March. Routine genome sequencing also led to the discovery of a more transmissible strain, which drove the country's second wave.
It's quite expensive. It takes about a day or so to do the sequencing and then the analysis. But so you cannot do absolutely everyone, but we do a representative samples. And from that, we learn which viruses are more common in specific settings.
Monitoring COVID-19 in other African countries hasn't been easy. Similar strains to those found in the UK and South Africa have been circulating on the continent, but it's difficult to tell which is driving a recent spike in cases and deaths.
So in South Africa, because we've got very good genetic surveillance, we are able to know that more than 90% of our isolates are the new variant. But at the moment, we do not know that, for example, for Mozambique or Botswana or the DRC or other places, because there's not enough surveillance being done there.
There's been some improvement since the pandemic hit. Efforts by the World Health Organization and Africa Centers for Disease Control have been ramped to boost testing capabilities.
Africa is busy setting up much better genetic surveillance systems to be able to pick up these variants more easily. So there's a huge effort going on through the Africa CDC at the moment to set up such systems, but there's still very limited surveillance in Africa.
So we really have to focus our efforts here and build all the capacity that we need to track the spread and the evolution of these new variants as they emerge. Clearly, what we need is the rapid rollout of vaccines in concert with all the other measures to contain the transmission. And what's very worrying is how far behind Africa is with getting access to the vaccines.
Africa has so far secured a tiny percentage of vaccines. Just a handful of countries, including South Africa, have started small-scale rollouts, but that picture may soon change. Ghana has received the first batch of shots from COVAX, an initiative run by the World Health Organization to help the continent acquire vaccines. Julie Shara, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
And to the Democratic Republic of Congo now. Officials have confirmed a 7th case of Ebola in the eastern province of North Kivu. The latest patient tested positive for the disease on Tuesday. Authorities say 4 people have already died of the contagious disease since the resurgence of Ebola was reported early this month. CGTN's Chris Ochamrenga has more.
The latest victim is the daughter of a woman who died of Ebola earlier this month. She's currently receiving treatment at a health facility in Katwa near Butembo City. The new case brings the total number of Ebola infections in eastern DRC to 7. Officials say 4 patients have already died. The DRC government and the World Health Organization recently launched a vaccination campaign in Butembo town to prevent the spread of the disease. But local leaders say some people have rejected measures aimed at curbing its spread. Some residents refuse to get their homes disinfected by health workers. The resurgence of Ebola in eastern DRC marks the start of the country's 12th Ebola outbreak. The 10th outbreak occurred in the same region and claimed more than 2,200 lives. Chris Ochamrenga, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Meanwhile, Guinea has started an Ebola vaccination campaign. Authorities there are racing to contain the first resurgence of the virus since the world's most widespread outbreak between 2013 and 2016. The vaccination campaign was launched in a rural community in Gweke. That's where the first cases were detected on the 14th of February. In a statement, the World Health Organization said it's using a ring strategy to vaccinate people who have come into contact with confirmed Ebola patients. Frontline and health workers are also being vaccinated. The resurgence of the virus has raised fears that a major outbreak could overwhelm health infrastructure already battling the coronavirus pandemic.
Everyone must come and get vaccinated because the government, partners, each and everyone wants to help us to deal with this illness.
Well, turning to news from Nigeria now, at least 10 people have been killed and dozens injured by suspected Boko Haram militants in the capital of Borno State, Maiduguri. The attackers fired explosives into densely populated parts of the city on Tuesday evening. The Nigerian army says it has repelled the attackers. Maiduguri is the epicenter of the 10-year-old insurgency that has killed more than 30,000 people and displaced at least 2 million locals. Well, let's get you more on these developments. We're now joined from Abuja in Nigeria by CGTN correspondent Phil Ihaza. Phil, to begin with, there are concerns the death toll could be higher than what is being reported. What is the latest from Borno State?
Well, thank you. What we know at the moment is that indeed there are reports that the death toll could be actually higher than what was reported earlier, although that confirmation has not come from directly from the government, but a militia leader, because most of these communities now subscribe to help from militia leaders who work closely with the military. One of the leaders in that community, in that city, actually stated that the death toll could be more than just 10, that it has risen to 16. Now, a reason for that explanation he gave is that from 4 children that died in one of the neighborhoods, the densely populated neighborhoods, that's Gwange, they were children playing in a field when the explosive affected them. So 4 died on the spot and 5 others died later on from severe injuries. And then another 5 died from the other neighborhood, which was densely populated, that's Adamkolo. So when you bring all of this together, it's difficult to believe that just 10 people died. But we'll wait for the official statement of the government or the military. But for now, the governor has visited the injured victims. Scores of them are in the hospital. He's also stated that they will receive free medical treatment until they are reunited with their families.
Well, Phil, when it comes to communities in Borno State and Maiduguri in particular, it has been reported that there are challenges in distinguishing between bandits, Boko Haram militants and ordinary citizens. How then are security agencies responding to this latest bout of militancy?
Well, it's a very, very tough and unfortunate incident, especially with the fact that since 2016, another front of insurgency emerged. That's with the guys of the Islamic State for West African Province, ISWAP. They emerged and it became 2 fronts of insurgency, the Boko Haram group and the ISWAP group. And the security experts since then have stated that, both of them sometimes been in loggerheads for territorial control and all of that. You might find a situation where one of the groups or members of one of the groups might just, spread to other parts of the country, other parts of the northeast or northern region to perpetrate evil. And that may just be what we're beginning to see, because we've seen attacks in the northeast that has a semblance of Boko Haram. We've seen similar attacks as well in the northwest and recently in the north central, talking about kidnap of school children. So it's just hopeful, really, that this may not be what we're faced with. But if it is, of course, we've seen the president recently, just about a month ago, replace his service chiefs to try to change the approach and tactics of the war against insurgency. And we've seen some reports recently, trend of tales of success by the military, and we hope that they will be able to overpower or overwhelm these recent attacks that we're seeing from the insurgents, or bandits, as you may call them.
Well, thank you so much for that, Phil Ihaza, live with us there from Abuja, Nigeria. Let's go to Egypt now, where the death toll from a capsized boat near the city of Alexandria has now risen to 14. Officials say at least 5 people are still missing. According to state newspaper Al-Ahram, a 6-month-old infant was among the victims who drowned in Lake Mariot, 20 kilometers west of Alexandria. The boat was carrying people from the same family who were on a fishing trip. Emergency teams have been sent to the lake to search for the missing. Here's Adel Al-Makhri with more.
The Egyptian prosecution has launched immediate investigation into the incident. The captain or the sailor of the boat was arrested right after he was treated at the local hospital to be investigated with. The owner of the boat have been also subject to questioning. This was an unlicensed sailboat in the lake that has been deployed without giving any concern to the local warnings about the weather conditions. The entire incident raises a lot of questions about the regulation of such small-sized boats, not only in the lake but all over Egypt in general, specifically in the Nile. This is not the first incident. It is common to see such incidents every other year, especially during holiday seasons. And the entire process have also raised questioning for the Prime Minister from Parliament members who are now trying to hold the government accountable and push for regulations to maintain the nation's authority over these illegal boats.
Time now for a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. 1 year on, South Sudan's unity government still struggles to end conflicts. And the U.S. tests an unarmed intercontinental ballistic missile that traveled at a speed of 24,000 kilometers per hour. Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories. Let's have a look. We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
I've been Djibouti, Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
For decades, one goal.
过上幸福美好的生活，一个人都不能少。
Over 700 million Chinese lifted from destitution. How has China achieved this? What does this mean for the country? And what does this mean for the world? Tune into our special coverage, Farewell to Poverty, only on CGTN.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says Washington will seek election to the UN Human Rights Council later this year. He made the announcement in a recorded video to the council. This marks the Biden administration's latest efforts to return to multilateral engagement.
I'm pleased to announce the United States will seek election to the Human Rights Council for the 2022 to 2024 term. We humbly ask for the support of all UN member states in our bid to return to a seat in this body.
Meanwhile, the United States has tested an unarmed intercontinental ballistic missile. It was launched from an airbase in California on Tuesday night. The missile traveled at a speed of 24,000 kilometers per hour and covered around 7,000 kilometers. The U.S. military says the launch aimed to verify the safety, effectiveness and readiness of the weapon system. Right, let's go to South Sudan now. Parties to the 2018 peace deal insist it will be fully implemented, this despite delays in setting up structures for a new government. It is now a year since the formation of the unity government, but reforms in the judiciary are yet to begin, and Parliament has also not yet reconstituted. CGTN's Patrick Oyet tells us more.
A peace deal signed in 2018 by 5 groups dictates that a new government comprising all groups be formed to run for 3 years from 2019. But delays in completing unification of the various armed groups meant formation of the new unity government only began in 2020. Disagreements over who should take which political positions followed, and up to now, some states still have no governments. The parliament is yet to be reconstituted. However, South Sudan's government says total peace will soon return to the country.
We are moving forward, but with those achievements like formation of the state government that you have seen, the formation of the national executive, and the cantonment of forces, the training of forces.
In South Sudan's capital, Juba, life is returning to normal for many after years of civil war, but some are concerned about the peace process.
Implementation has been slow. Since the signing of the peace agreement in 2018, South Sudanese become happy. They expect they will join a new life, but unfortunately, they have been disappointed by the parties to the revitalized peace agreement, simply because there is no trust among themselves.
All of us, government and we citizens, we are part of this agreement. And if we are part of this agreement should not be owned by politicians only, neither should be owned by citizens only. But through our collaboration together, we can shape this country forward as we want.
The 2018 peace agreement provides for a permanent constitution-making process, which is also yet to be completed. The reconstituted Joint Monitoring and Evaluation Commission, a body mandated to monitor the implementation of the South Sudan's peace deal, says the silencing of the guns is the major achievement of the 2018 peace deal. However, South Sudan's government warns that unless the unified forces that came from various armed groups are redeployed, the situation will remain volatile.
Until today, we have 2 forces under 2 different commands. And that is risky. You need to have 1 army in the country under 1 commander-in-chief to maintain, to keep the gun silence and maintain this permanent ceasefire.
The government says it lacks funds to facilitate graduation of trained forces and their redeployment. Lockdown due to the COVID-19 pandemic is causing more delays, making many here lose hope of lasting peace returning to the country soon. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Well, even as South Sudan marks 1 year since the Government of National Unity was formed to end years of conflict, humanitarian agencies have expressed concern over increasing sporadic violence, the displacement of people by floods, and a looming famine. Multiple UN agencies have warned that over half the population could be facing acute food insecurity in the coming months. Humanitarian agencies are calling for urgent solutions to prevent the country from returning to war. Meanwhile, Senegal has today kicked off its COVID-19 national vaccination campaign. Top government officials, including Foreign Minister Aissata, the former Prime Minister Suleiman, have already received China's Sinopharm jab. Some medical staff also took part, were also part of the team that was vaccinated on Wednesday. Now, the first batch of 200,000 doses of the Chinese-made vaccine arrived in the country on the 17th of February. The country has prioritized distribution of the vaccine to specific groups, including medical staff and people above 60. The country's health minister, Abdoulaye Diouf Sarr, says this first phase of vaccination will be done with equity and transparency.
It is the principle of equity that has enabled us today to be present in the 14 regions of Senegal. Transparency is important because it is absolutely necessary to respect the priority targets.
My feeling is of satisfaction and pride, and above all, recognition both towards the Chinese government, which has made these vaccines available to us, but also recognition towards President Macky Sall and the health authorities who have given us benefit from this vaccine. My appeal is to all Senegalese, when the state is in a position to ensure that we all have a vaccine for everyone, don't hesitate. This vaccine cannot hurt. Do not hesitate to go for the vaccine because the vaccine protects you.
And let's now go to Uche for your latest business news.
Thank you, Lindy. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. South Africa scraps tax hikes and turns to Treasury to bankroll its vaccine program. And Zimbabwe raises lending rates to tackle rising inflation.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Well, let's start off in South Africa. The country has tabled a budget speech that does not include substantial tax hikes to help pay for its vaccine program. Now, Finance Minister Tito Mboweni has reversed the decision to raise an extra $2.8 billion in taxes over the next 4 years, funds that would have been allocated for COVID-19 vaccines. The country will instead use budget allocations or emergency withdrawals, amongst other options. Now, vaccines will be rolled out free of charge for the majority of South Africans, while private providers will be able to claim back from medical aid schemes. And still in South Africa, the latest labor data shows that 333,000 people found jobs in the fourth quarter of 2020. That, of course, brings the total number of employed people to 15 million. But the country is far from achieving significant job growth. Unemployment figures have risen to 7.2 million. Here's Angelo Coppola with the details.
Analysts weren't surprised by the rebound in South African employment numbers.
We expected the improvement in jobs and the increase in unemployment, partly due to the fact that we knew jobs were coming back, and with that, more people started looking for work. And therefore, the unemployment rate went up because the one part of the definition of unemployment is you must be looking for work.
The official South African unemployment rate is now 32.5%. That's up 1.7% from quarter three. Youth unemployment is a staggering 63.2%.
There's about 1.4 million more people looking for jobs, plus then additional people moving into the labour market of 500,000 to 600,000.
The percentage of adults working before COVID-19 struck compared to the end of 2020 paints a gloomy picture.
It rose only slightly from 37.5% to 38.2%, which tells you that this is still a long recovery, because before the crisis started, 42% of South African adults were working.
The country's economic growth rate and the unemployment data are closely linked.
We have the same kind of job growth on the back of economic growth, and what we've seen over the last couple of years. It can take up to a decade for us to get back to 2019 levels of unemployment, i.e. around 28 to 29%.
South Africa's unemployment rate is still unacceptably high, and it's unlikely to change anytime soon, given the economic growth rates that are being predicted for the rest of the year and 2022. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And adding to Zimbabwe now, the country's central bank has raised its policy rate as it aims to cut annual headline inflation to no more than 10% by the end of 2021. Here's Farai Mwakutuya reporting from Harare.
The Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe has revised its quarterly reserve money growth target from 25% to 22.5% as it aims to maintain exchange rate stability and continue the downward inflation trend. It's raised lending rates to tighten money supply and encourage productive use of funds.
From June 22 to December, the loans to the productive sector increased by 82 billion, having been 37 billion in June. So that's a huge increase, and you have to cap that, because what you don't want to do, you don't want to put too much money into the system so that it overheats. So he has to make it a little more expensive for companies to borrow, so that when they borrow, they really think about borrowing and they are going to put it in productive sector.
The move to raise lending rates may also affect the equities market, which has been offering inflation-beating returns, which had enticed some people to borrow funds to invest there. The central bank said 70% of the $795 million disbursed by the foreign currency auction since its launch in June was spent on raw materials, machinery and equipment. It's doubled the individual cash withdrawal limits, a move analysts say will enhance transaction convenience. Monetary authorities also confirmed the imminent release of a $50 banknote, which they say should not stoke inflation. However, as has been observed in the past, sentiment and not necessarily economic fundamentals play a part in driving inflation here.
When you have a huge informal sector, it's very difficult to use formal tools and formal economic policy to try and collect the informal sector. And that is the challenge that the Reserve Bank will always face. We have seen, for example, inflation spiking regardless of the rate stabilizing. It indicates that the activity, economic activity in the formal sector is not ruled by what the formal sector is doing.
Foreign currency inflows for 2020 were $6.3 billion, up from $5.5 billion the previous year, propelled by a record diaspora remittances of over $1 billion, justifying calls for more concerted efforts to encourage the economic participation of Zimbabweans abroad. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Meanwhile, Nigeria's Independent Corrupt Practices Commission says the recent #EndSARS protests were largely funded with cryptocurrency. Now, the chairman of ICPC says there are strong indications that cryptocurrencies could be used to fund insurgency in the country. This comes after a committee was formed to look into the central bank's decision to ban cryptocurrencies in Nigeria. Now, the ICPC supports that decision and adds that the way cryptocurrencies operate exposes the country to money laundering and terrorism financing. And moving on, U.S. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell says there's no need to worry about inflation. He was speaking at a hearing before the Senate Banking Committee. Now, the central bank is facing mounting criticism over its no-limit monetary support, and there are now fears that the bank's extraordinary measures will send consumer prices soaring in a post-pandemic economy. Here's Owen Fairclough reporting from Washington.
This isn't a typical message from the head of one of the world's most powerful central banks. There's nothing more important to the economy now than people getting vaccinated.
But Jerome Powell is trying to steer the US out of a very untypical period with a mixture of ultra-low interest rates and feeding $120 billion into the economy every month.
It seems obvious vaccinating as many people as possible in the United States will clearly help the economy recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. But Powell's critics think he should be focusing less on vaccines and more on his primary duties.
One of them is aiming for maximum employment. That's traditionally an unemployment rate of 5% or less. The US enjoyed that for 5 years before unemployment soared to Great Depression era levels in the first wave of the pandemic. It's now down to just over 6%. The other is inflation. The target is around 2%, but it's been well below that for some time.
But there's growing concern that those ultra-low interest rates, those hundreds of billions of dollars being pumped into the economy every month, and the prospect of a third stimulus package in a year will cause the economy to overheat instead of recovering steadily.
Powell told lawmakers on Tuesday he has it all covered.
Prices remain particularly soft. Overall, on a 12-month basis, inflation remains below our 2% longer-run objective.
But some economists see signs of inflation in things like producer prices. They surged to their highest level in over 10 years last month, raising fears they'll be passed on to consumers. And while those economists fear a repeat of the hyperinflation of the 1970s, there's an example unfolding right now in Sudan. In just a few years, inflation has rocketed to more than 300% due to crippling foreign debts, compounding an economic crisis. Owen Fairclough, CGTN, Washington.
Meanwhile, the Australian Senate has started debating amendments to a landmark legislation, one that will force Facebook and Google to pay media companies for their news content. Now, the debate comes as Facebook says it will restore news pages to its users in Australia after blocking it earlier. Greg Navarro with the details.
That last-minute deal was confirmed as the government apparently had enough support to pass the final bit of this legislation through Parliament. Now, as a result, Facebook says that it will start restoring Australian news media content back on its platform. You may remember earlier this month that Facebook banned Australian news media sites from its platform. That included at the time when it did that non-news media sites such as health and community services, emergency services, even the Bureau of Meteorology. And Facebook says it did so in response to that legislation that is poised to pass here in Australia that would basically require tech giants Google and Facebook to pay individual Australian news media companies for the content that appears on those platforms. Now, Facebook's ban, as you can imagine, prompted widespread criticism, not only here in Australia, but around the world. And this legislation is being watched closely by countries around the world, especially those countries that are hoping to find some kind of legal way to, in essence, force these tech giants to pay their fair share. Now, as part of this last-minute deal, Facebook says it will retain the ability to decide what news appears on its platform so that it won't be subjected to forced negotiations. Australia's treasurer has been in contact and in discussions with Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg over the last couple of days. Facebook released a statement not long ago here saying it was pleased the company was able to reach some sort of compromise and that it appreciated the constructive discussions. All of this comes after Google had threatened to pull its search engine from use in Australia, instead deciding to strike out individual deals with individual media companies. Greg Navarro, CGTN, Sydney.
Well, Australia's impending media law is also being closely watched in Europe, where some groups are now turning up the heat on lawmakers to follow suit. Here's Tony Waterman reporting from Brussels.
The opportunity to rewrite the rules of online revenue sharing doesn't present itself very often, so European publishers intend to strike while the iron is hot. 4 leading industry groups representing thousands of news outlets are pressing EU lawmakers to include an Australia-style clause in sweeping new digital legislation, forcing big tech to pay for news.
What we're looking for is some kind of tool, whether that is an arbitration mechanism or not, some kind of tool that is this big stick that we need to get platforms to sit at the table and negotiate fair and reasonable conditions with publishers on the use of their content.
Down under, the proposed media law sparked a wave of licensing deals with Google, something European media groups hope to replicate. Some experts believe content producers stand to make $2 billion a year in fees, a lifeline for an industry that has struggled to keep its head above water for years.
Monopolies cannot go on very long relying their business model on the free use of content that they do not pay for. They do not compensate those that produce the content.
But some media analysts think the plan could backfire. Big tech may pick and choose who to strike deals with, based on how much engagement that content will generate.
So I can easily see a situation where the large media corporations, they get deals with Facebook and they get some kind of compensation, whereas the small media will be left behind in this.
In Parliament on Tuesday, the EU's chief for digital affairs seemed in no hurry to include a clause on mandatory payments in new digital legislation, instead pointing to the bloc's 2019 copyright reform, which requires major platforms to pay artists and news publishers for content.
I'd say this is so much more a question of copyright. The copyright legislation, where actually as a publisher you have a right to get paid for your content, has only been fully transposed so far in France.
There's a June deadline to enact the legislation, but many member states have fallen behind, leaving news outlets waiting to collect. The news industry has been trying to convince lawmakers to force big, profitable tech firms to pay for their content for years. But there now appears to be fresh impetus. Governments around the world are growing increasingly concerned that big tech is abusing its power, stymieing innovation, squeezing out competitors, and now blocking content to users. It could be the final straw for lawmakers keen to keep the internet as democratized as possible. Tony Waterman, CGTN, Brussels.
And that's all for now on Africa Live Biz. But coming up later on Global Business Africa, we'll bring you more analysis of South Africa's budget plans as it struggles to revive an economy battered by the coronavirus pandemic. Of course, all that coming up top of the hour. For now, back to you, Lindy.
Thanks, Uche. We'll take a short break now. Your sports news up next.